Well, now we're going to get into our topic of the day, and today we're talking about contingencies in an offer to purchase. Now, offer to purchase is basically a document that you would fill out if you want to offer on a home, and it's got a lot of parts and pieces, which is why you really need a real estate agent to help you through this process. It's not something you should go online, print it out, and try to go through yourself. There's too much stuff going on in there. You need somebody that does it every day, that is there looking out for you and to help you out with that process. Now, when we talk about contingencies, you can think of a contingency as maybe defined differently as something the contract or the offer relies on this, right?
Yes, it's an action or a requirement that you write into your offer that should be completed for the home to close.
Yep.
And you don't always have to complete your contingencies, right? I mean, let's talk about an inspection contingency. You might say, oh, I want to write it in, but you never do one. It doesn't mean that your offer is not necessarily going to close, but it's a safeguard for buyers and sellers to know what the expectations are when that offer is accepted, to bring the offer to closing. And then this also protects the buyer that, if something goes awry in one of their contingencies, they can then get out of their offer to purchase, legally, obviously.
Yeah. So just because you have a home inspection contingency in your offer doesn't mean you're required to get a home inspection.
Correct. And same thing with if you had a financing contingency, which means you were going to go to the bank, but you had the possibility to purchase with cash. You don't have to complete these contingencies, but they're in place so that you're doing the right thing in at the time that you take possession of the house. So there's no big regrets, right?
And the sellers know what might happen during the transaction.
100%, because if you don't write in, let's say, a radon contingency, and then you want to suddenly test for radon, that seller has the right to tell you no, that you're not testing for radon.
Yeah.
So make sure that you write the contingencies in that are absolutely important to you to purchase the property, because the seller can say no if it's not written in.
Yeah, and that's basically because they're accepting a contract between you and them to buy the house for a certain price with these conditions on the transaction, and you can't go back and change those after you've already come to an agreement. Now, there is some, other negotiation that happens after that because of some things that can occur, like in the home inspection or with radon testing or something like that. But those are, I guess, results of contingencies, would you call that?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now in this market, like it always seems, if you're asking for inspection right now, a lot of buyers are saying, well, listen, we don't want to nickel and dime the seller, right? We don't want to give them every single repair that's on that list, because obviously when we do a home inspection, the list can be long. Doesn't mean that they're all major. Yeah, it doesn't mean that they're all major. So right now, a lot of our buyers have been writing for inspection because they'd like to make sure they cover themselves. But then they're writing in, okay, we're going to cover the first 5,000 of repairs or the first 10,000, whatever it might be.
Yep.
Just to let them know, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, whoever it is, we'd like to do the inspection, but just to let you know, we don't expect to have every single tiny little repair, like if it's a GFCI or something like that.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a little bit more, it's something that the seller sees as a little bit more like, okay, I get it.
Palatable.
Yep.
Yeah. And, when we're talking about contingencies, you guys, there's a number of them within the offer to purchase. Okay. Inspection contingency is just one of them. And when it comes to the home inspection contingency, it's something that basically you put in there for a timeline of 7, 10, 12, 15 days, whatever the market is, you think is necessary at this time. And basically you have that 10, 12, 15 days to get your home inspection done and to initiate like a amendment or anything like that you may want to
action
as a
plan,
result.
right?
Yeah, an action plan that because based on stuff you found out during the inspection that you didn't know before. Some people call it a second kick at the can. It kind of is, but I don't know. I don't see a way around it really. Unless there's inspections being done or required as a part of sale. Where it has to be done way ahead of time, and then everybody has all the information to negotiate. Because when you're going in and looking at houses, you're looking at 15, 20 houses, and you're not doing you're not inspecting the house for all these little things or anything like that. So you're kind of left a little uneducated about the property when you're offering on the home, and that's why the home inspection contingency is so important, because you got to find out what you're purchasing. And when you do it without a home inspection, man,
Scary.
You can be held with a pretty dirty bag in the end on that. But so the home inspection contingency is one of them. The other one is financing contingency, and basically this is that element that you can go out and get financing, or how you're going to pay for the house, right? So how does the financing contingency work for a buyer perspective?
So basically, just I mean, from what we do, someone's going to be getting a mortgage from a mortgage lender, whether it's a bank or a credit union or a mortgage lender, whatever it might be, and they usually have about 25 days for loan commitment. And the idea is that the folks at the bank or the mortgage lenders are going to have to make sure that whatever they're lending the money for, actually it appraises for that. So they're going to call in an appraiser to appraise the property, and then make sure that whatever money that they're giving for that, whatever the offer is that it actually will appraise out for that value.
Okay, so the financial contingency is reliant on the appraisal contingency.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
right?
because the bank's not going to lend on something they don't know what the value is.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Correct. I mean, there are people that are writing in appraisal shortfall language, which states that, if the appraisal comes in, let's say $10,000 for sake of conversation, that the buyer would cover said appraisal shortfall.
Okay.
I was really hoping that was a thing of the past as far as last year goes, but unfortunately I am starting to see that again in this market. I mean, you're really putting a lot of skin in the game because your lender's only going to lend you X amount of dollars, and if it only appraised $10,000 less than what you were hoping, then you're on the hook for $10,000.
So that's saying you offered $320,000 on a house, but it only appraised at $310,000.
Yes.
Yep.
And then you're
need to
in
bring-
that contract. You're saying I'm gonna
bring $10,000 to
Yep.
closing to make the deal happen.
Yep.
okay, even if
Yeah.
it doesn't appraise.
Right.
Correct.
But I think for the most part, I think people want the home so badly that they're willing to say, all right, I'm going to bring money to the table in case it doesn't appraise. I want to make sure that I've got enough money at closing to take care of it. One thing that we've done before, I've done it a couple times, is I've actually written an appeal to the appraiser, going through the report and making sure that everything that's on that report is accurate as far as what we know.
Yeah.
And it actually worked. We actually had one that appraised. I think it was about $8,000 less than the value. Wrote an appeal, stated everything that we had as far as what we had as far as evidence, and we got $5,000 back. We ended up talking to the seller, and the seller told us, you know what, it's $3,000. I don't mind lowering the price by the $3,000. We made it work. I mean, I think as agents, I think we're always thought of as like being the connectors, right? We're like the universal adapters, right? Trying to make these people want to buy the house, the people want to sell the house. Let's get them together.
Find a way to
Absolutely.
make it work.
Yeah.
On the financial contingency, too, as far as the appraiser goes, the appraiser needs to find a comparable property. When we bought this house, there was nothing comparable to the size of this house.
Within
there
a
is
certain
now.
distance.
Exactly. So they were going to under it. We did what Mark talked about. We did an appeal, and we found we had to widen our search a little bit, and we were okay in the long run. It added a few more steps, a little more stress as a home buyer, but the job got done. Obviously, we bought the house.
Yeah, we didn't follow the rule book. We bought the most expensive house in the subdivision instead of the cheapest house in the subdivision.
Well, it is a beautiful house.
It is a nice
yeah.
house, and Tammy fell in love with it, and it was going to happen one way or the other. But it was like, what are you going to do? And it ended up being a thing with the bank trying to get the approval
Yeah.
for the loan and stuff, and whatnot. But it ended up working out in the end, So, and because we bought in 2009, it really, I mean, we've probably not doubled, but we've gained significantly on the value of the home,
Sure,
in
sure.
that time period. So that's good. So appraisal contingency, that basically is what we were just talking about with that it's going to appraise out properly and that kind of stuff. And then in today's market, I mean, do you find appraisers like being way off as to what you're offering and stuff?
I haven't had that.
I think I had maybe one last year, and we tried to appeal, and it was just kind of like hitting our heads against the wall. So you're always going to find the one-off, right? But
Sure.
no, I think that most things are coming in at value, and I think a lot of lenders are being a lot more hard-nosed, if you will, with who they're lending to and stuff. This is not like it was back in 2007, 2008 either. So they're making sure that the people are well qualified as well.
And the appraisal thing's tough. I mean, in my opinion, a house is worth what somebody's willing to pay. Like anything's worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Correct.
But the bank needs to know that it's got that value, and that's where the appraisal really comes in, is to cover the bank. But
Right. If they have to take your house back, they want to know that they're at least going to recoup what they lent to you, if they have to foreclose on it, unfortunately.
yeah,
Yeah, and like Tammy was saying, that the whole idea that when you have that appraisal going on, the fact that when those appraisers go out and do that, it could be tough to find those. I think that's where you're going to have the biggest trouble, is if you're in a neighborhood where all the homes are basically the same, they might be the same builder, a little easier to find comps, right?
Well,
but if
yeah.
you found a house that was out on a main highway by itself, tucked on a bunch of acres.
Rural out in Wales or something.
Yeah, something. And then it becomes a little bit more difficult because then you have to broaden that radius out 5 miles, 6 miles, 7 miles, whatever it might be.
Sure.
So that's where it might get more tough.
Yeah, and that was with us. They only went a certain distance, and we had to get them to go out further than that to get. I mean, the houses that they're using for comps weren't even near the square footage. I mean, it just didn't make sense. Yeah.
So,
Well, and also when you're talking about financing, one of the things that I'm sure that you guys tell your clients, if you're working with the buyers, is to get pre-qualified before looking at the house. Like, know what your
100%.
range
Yes.
is.
100%. Yeah, we when we do that, I know it's pretty common between a lot of the agents is that we do a initial meeting with our buyers, sit down with them. We kind of give them about a half hour's worth of education about what's going on with the process.
Sure.
And we make sure that before we go showing houses to them, that they're actually pre-qualified or pre-approved for
100%. I will not schedule showings, and I know that is been a sticking point with some people, but you're getting everybody's hopes up, and some people are like, oh, financing's not a big deal, but it's like, well, you have to, if it's not a big deal, then go get the letter.
Yeah,
you know
and
what I mean?
your own,
Well,
Right.
not only that, but you owe it to the sellers and the agents on the other side of the transaction that you're
Absolutely.
bringing someone who is ready, willing, and able to buy the house.
Yeah,
100%.
Yep, and unless some people they think they're capable of lending more money, borrowing more money than they are.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
Capable.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Now, some of the other things that we have in there, as far as a contingency, well and septic inspection, it's just usually a separate thing. It's not a part of the home inspection. Well and septic inspection is usually just going to be on those rural homes where we have a septic system, we have a well system. Sometimes we have just a well system and they're on municipal sewer. But well and septic inspection, a contingency that the seller usually is agreeing to take care of, right?
Usually, I would say that my buyers have been footing the bills for a lot of well and septic inspections over the course of the last year. It's pretty much anything that we can do to sweeten the deal, take a little of the onus off of the seller themselves. I mean, we would then give the seller the right to cure in most cases. I had a random one-off situation where the arsenic was high once, and they just wanted to treat the kitchen faucet, not thinking that the arsenic, obviously, we'd be using showers, and little kids are bathing in it and things like that.
And hoses outside when the sprinkler's going on.
Yeah.
Right.
So, lots of gray lines in that one. But I would say in the last year, I have had buyers that are paying for well and septic a lot more than ever before.
How much are they paying for that?
Less than $1,000, but with the well and septic combined, I want to say it typically comes out to be like $850 to $950. But I always tell people to expect at least $1,000 so that if it's less, then great, right? But again, people are getting pretty desperate to get into these houses, and they're jumping through a lot of hoops to go ahead and make that happen.
Not something to skip though. Well and septic. I mean, the septic
No.
system.
Oh, huge expense! Oh my gosh,
$15,000 to $25,000
To replace
it if your septic system's bad.
and that's if you can replace it with another conventional. I mean,
Right.
imagine if you have to put a holding tank in, and
Or
then
a
you're
mound
pumping that
system.
thing
Right.
every 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That'd be
those
no
are
good.
big expenses. I definitely suggest everybody do their due diligence when it comes to that. Obviously, everyone
sure.
makes their own decisions, but when you're talking about sanitation and drinking water, that's not something really to mess around with.
No, not that's the health of your family. And
No,
stuff.
absolutely
Well,
not.
and the septic system is your resale too. I mean, you're not going to be in the house forever. You buy the house, you're going to sell the house at some point. You're not going to, yeah, I want to go out feet first. Okay, somebody's got to sell the house,
Right,
okay?
at some
Somebody
It's
does.
gonna
Yeah.
happen. So you gotta be prepared for that, and you don't want to get stuck holding all the eggs. You want to split those eggs up a little bit, and that's where home inspection and well and septic inspections come into play, and appraisal contingencies and all that kind of stuff. Now, as far as these contingencies go that we've been talking about, generally they apply to residential construction or residential homes, right? How do these apply to multifamily, commercial, or say land purchases?
Well, the WB11 is for 1 to 4 family homes, so I would say that does
It
pretty
covers.
much transfer over almost identically. I mean, obviously, you don't have to have any or all of these contingencies at all, but there are contingencies in commercial purchases and land purchases only. I mean, surveying, those are typically more land and commercial type deals, or proposed use contingencies. Those are for commercial and land use, but you'll usually find financing, the right to inspect and appraisal in almost all of these.
Yeah, commercial,
all of
they're
these
not going to
deals.
probably do radon or anything.
Not typically not. That's more of a, you're searching for a business. You're not going to be too worried about radon and stuff, but they may still want to inspect the building in general.
Sure.
But,
and they still have well and septic on the commercial stuff?
well, I mean, I guess that depends what type of commercial building. Is it a business with bathrooms, and is it rural, right?
Yeah.
Because then yes, and then if that is the case, then absolutely right in your well and septic.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now, one of the things that these contingencies have is they have a time frame in which they need to be completed. Now, they're all laid out very clearly. Like your well and septic is the buyer has to receive notice like 15 to 20 days before closing, and the home inspection is going to be on the front end, and that's going to be you have 10 to 12 days from acceptance of offer or whatever it is. Radon's going to be usually a little bit longer than that. Financing contingency, I mean, there's got to be a time frame in there that they assign, right?
Yeah, it's usually 25 to 30 days. It's one of the last things to get loan commitment right before the close. The one thing we always think about when we think of time of essence is because when it's written in the contract, you want to go by those guidelines, because if you pass those without addressing what it is, they'll expire or you'll be out of contract.
Yeah.
For us, it's the biggest part for us is as agents is to have good communication with the other side, so that any of those things that we might be broaching or coming close to, we'll have communication. If we have to do an amendment to lengthen the inspection contingency, we can do that.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of good communication. And my favorite thing with any agent that we work with is that they're really good at communicating. It can help out both sides tremendously, right? So
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and like last year, they had the banks were backed up, the appraisers were backed up, or whatever, and things took longer. So you had people writing contingency time frames in there that weren't being met.
Doable, right.
Yeah, and so at that point, you then have to, hey, we're still in this. We're good. We just
Right.
the bank's taking forever. I don't know what's going on, and so we got to communicate and do some extensions. And extensions are basically just a small amendment to the contract that changed the deadline.
Correct.
Right. Back it up a little bit. Okay. Back it up or move it up. I mean, you could theoretically move things up if you put a 3-month window on there because your lease was going to expire in 3 months or whatever, and you want to move it up, and the sellers are okay with moving up, you can make amendments in that way to
yeah, a lot of times
closing
when
dates
we
and
write
stuff.
in a closing date, we'll say honor before, because
Okay,
because
sure.
if everything gets tied up and it's all done, might as well get it closed out and be done with it, right?
Yeah.
There's no reason to do that. So a lot of times we'll put honor before as part of our clause.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. And then as far as contingencies, there are different perspectives on this, right? And so like we talked about, some people are skipping home inspection contingency or changing their home inspection contingency to look more attractive to a seller.
Right.
Yeah. Because a home inspection is a potential for a problem
Right.
in the transaction. And if we come in and we find, like yesterday, this was a hot, steamy pile yesterday. Holy cow. It was something else. I really hope they're not listening right now. But it had foundation problems. It had structural issues. It had mold in the attic. It had a roof problem. I mean, there was so much going on. To come to go through all the work of getting your offer accepted and all this other kind of stuff, and then to be met with all this
All
stuff.
these issues,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, sellers sometimes really don't like home inspection contingencies. But the reality is, it's what you're selling.
It is, and I think that brings to the whole point about the condition report, the RECR that are used between buyers and sellers. So as agents, we're there for that whole time period, showing the house all the way up through close. After that portion, that condition report is the one thing that ties the buyers and sellers together legally. So if they're not going to be disclosing the things that they have, we always tell all of our sellers, like, the only way you can get in trouble is not telling the truth or not telling the whole truth. So whatever you do with the condition report, tell the truth, because the truth is the buyers know what they're buying, sellers know what they're selling, right? I mean, that's the way it should be. That's what it should be.
Doesn't always work that way.
Doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, sellers, lots of times they try to hide stuff, and it's kind of like you go to buy the car and the guy spray painted the rust, put some lipstick
Right.
on, and it's like, dude, that's not what you're selling me. You're selling me a rusty car. You gotta charge rusty car prices, or at least, or you know what? If you think it's worth that, tell me what you have going on, and that's my decision to make, But so pre-listing inspections can help forego that a lot, which is a great idea. But when we get into like the financing contingency, sellers aren't going to have a real issue with that, right? They're going to understand appraisal contingency has to happen, right?
Correct, yes.
But when it comes to well and septic contingency, I guess, like you're saying, that maybe that's not a assumed thing.
As
Right?
far as
From a
The
seller's
sell-
perspective.
it had been assumed for many, many years. I
Yeah.
mean, for 9 years prior to this, I would say, yes, it was assumed that the sellers were going to be taking care of that. But now, again, just trying to get anybody in the door, get your offer accepted.
Yeah.
You have to get kind of creative.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, from a buyer's perspective, they want every contingency under the planet,
Right.
because those contingencies protect you in the
themselves.
transaction,
Correct.
and give you outs and things like that in most cases.
I was just going to say, and now that we've got so many buyers at each property, if there's 10 offers, I would bet like as a fair scale, I would think 5 of them might even have home inspections. 5 might have them. 5 might not. As a seller, a lot of times the seller's like, well, I'm just going to look at the ones that don't have a home inspection because that's one less thing as far as a contingency I have to worry about. The truth is the house is still the same. It doesn't matter what the contingency is.
Yeah.
They have to be honest on their RECR. But that's the battle that you're in when you have so many buyers on one single property.
Right. Yep.
That you're running into that competition. Okay, what can I get rid of to make my offer cleaner? Right?
Sure.
So we're running into that.
And that brings up one contingency that we haven't seen in quite a while, probably on any offer to purchases, and that's home sale contingency.
Yeah, no,
that was a thing. I mean, when we bought our house, we had it on,
Right.
in 2009.
Right.
But in 2009, you couldn't sell your house for nothing. There was nobody buying. It was a straight up 100% buyer market. So
it's tough. I mean, you run into people who don't want to sell or don't want to do XYZ until they have something to buy, and even more so in this market, like, where are we going to go?
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't accepted an offer with a home sale contingency.
Well,
what years? I don't know. A couple.
Well, even as a seller, like we're starting to institute now when we're asking for post-closing occupancy, right? So
Right.
as a seller, we can give them 30, 60 days post-closing. So if you have a late closing, 30 to 45 days, then you've got another additional 60 days in order to find a house. It makes it a lot easier for somebody to go and look for something and get something under contract.
Yeah.
So they're not feeling like we don't have a place to go, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that we've been using as far as the sellers are concerned.
Yeah, my sister, when she bought her house, they put in a month that they're going to rent the house for a month after closing,
Right.
and basically they had that month to pack up and make sure everything went through with their house and get moved, and it was much more comfortable for them than
Right.
having to do it all in one day type of thing. Or whatever,
We had a clients of ours that were in a house for 44 years and they are moving to a retirement community.
Sure.
We definitely gave them I think it was 30 days to get the house packed up. They had family come in. I mean, 44 years worth of stuff in a home.
Oh my gosh,
gosh.
yeah.
That's a lot of stuff, and trying to get that all in one place, and especially when they're going to a place where it can't take pretty much any of that stuff because they're going to a smaller apartment. But that helps out a ton, especially for those seniors that are doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when it comes to the transaction occurring, and these contingencies get completed, is there like a thing you have to like fill out, like we've completed this contingency, or
It's
just
not
you
necessary.
just assume they're happening?
It's not necessary, but some agents like to get it in writing. Like, okay, instead of it just expiring, buyer waives home inspection contingency, it just helps in the event that something comes up after.
Sure.
You can be like, well, you actually sent me this that said you were foregoing this. It wasn't missed.
Right.
The inspection
Didn't just
didn't just run
disappear.
out. Correct. Most of the time, I would say we don't do that. I personally don't, right? Especially if we come to terms on an amendment or some of those things. But
Sure.
there are some agents who really like that, and I can completely understand why.
Yeah. So if like we do the home inspection that we don't find anything really crazy, or you're good with everything, generally speaking, people are going to send back some sort of element saying I'm waiving the home inspection contingency. But in theory, you could just not say anything.
Yeah, just
and
let it expire.
and let it expire.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is the home inspection contingency, something tried and true to my heart. Okay, but with the home inspection contingency, there's a difference between inspection and testing, and that is a debate that occurs lots of times in real estate offices. Right. I'm aware of. Inspection is basically looking at operating, that kind of stuff. It's not taking samples, where testing is more taking samples of things and stuff. So as a home inspector, I can look at things, I can operate appliances, I can operate mechanicals, I can go up and look in the attic, I can, do all kinds of looking, inspecting, but I can't do any testing. So I can't take samples of mold. I can't take samples of paint to see if it's lead-based paint. I can't take samples of insulation to see if it's asbestos or anything like that. All I can do is visually inspect it or operate it if it were a mechanical device, as if I were the homeowner. Okay, so there's a little bit of difference there. Some people think that a home inspector can do testing as well. We can't. So I can't take a water sample and tell if your water's safe or anything like that. awesome if I could do all those things, but your inspection would be incredibly expensive at that point. And it's not something that's really realistic in the time frame that a home inspection has to get completed. So,
Right.
So that's that. Other party inspections. So, like, I inspect and I find that there's a problem with the water pressure in the house, right? And I suggest that a plumber come in and inspect the property, right? And that is a separate thing. How does that occur if it's found that there's a problem with the plumbing system at the house? How does that work for you guys on the negotiating side of things?
Well, I would say, I guess it goes back to the difference between, what the inspection contingency is and the testing contingency, because I would argue to say that a plumber would fall under the scope of inspection, and you can write that in an amendment, a licensed plumber to find the cause of the low water pressure and
issue.
Correct it with proof and paid invoice, lien waiver, etc. If you're talking about something like mold in the attic, well, that's a little different. Then that would fall, in my opinion, under the testing contingency.
Take samples.
I mean, let's be honest. Most people who test for mold, they bring out a qualified mold company, and those people aren't even testing, they're confirming visually, right? Because the buyer then wants to save the money on that aspect. But that would then fall, in my opinion, under the testing contingency, which can also be put on the amendment that the seller at seller's expense to have mold company come out and remediate the mold and things like that. But, when you're talking about plumbers, electricians, unless you're doing a full third-party inspection, I don't necessarily believe, and you can correct me if you disagree, that falls under testing, because you were made aware of the home inspection and you said it was obviously wrong. Okay, well, we don't really need to have another full-blown inspection. We just need it repaired at that point in time.
Sure.
Well, and I think that's the other thing too, is that by having the inspection itself, that gives you the leverage to then go and ask for more inspection or more testing. I know that we've done that with a foundation on a duplex that we were looking at in our buyer. We noticed that there was a couple light bulbs that weren't on, and whenever I see no light bulbs in a part of a basement, first thing I'm doing is getting my light on and looking. And of course, there were some issues there. Because the inspection showed that, we called out a foundation specialist. I spent about 2 hours in the lower level with this with the foundation guy, and we just found out that there was probably $40,000 or $50,000 worth of damage that needed to be repaired. But we wouldn't have been able to do that unless we had the initial inspection, right? Because that gave us the leverage there to move forward with the extra inspection.
So did they take the light bulbs out to hide the problem?
Don't know that for sure, but I know that good tip for anybody. We always take our buyers through the lower level first, the basement. We always tell our buyers that we don't want you to fall in love with the first and second level if the basement isn't taken care of. If you go to a basement that's not well lit, bring out your phone, turn that light on, look through everything, because you never know. I mean, it could be the fact they didn't have enough light bulbs. I don't know. I don't want to say anything, but the truth is, you got to be able to see everything that you can possibly see. You try to see.
Yeah. And then as far as the extensions, generally the extensions are within reason, of course. I need 5 days because I only have 3 days left of my contingency, but I can't get my plumber out here for 5 days later. So then you would send in an amendment. Now, what if they don't agree to that amendment? Then what do? Then you have a choice to make, like walk away from the house, or
everything's negotiable, right? So between agents, we should be able to come up with a reasonable solution to that. We haven't had a problem with the extension, especially if it's something that's been called out prior. It would be something, if you added, that's where you'd probably run into a little bit more of a problem. Yeah.
Well, and I think from seller's perspective, they just don't want the transaction to be extended longer because they have time frames that they're trying to meet as well.
Right.
So as long as you're getting it done in a timely fashion, usually I would say that your extensions are not going to be an issue.
I think it's worth saying that you should make realistic, deadlines to begin with. I'm just running into a commercial deal that I'm working with, and something came up. We were supposed to close, and now we're extending about a month and a half, because when you're dealing with counties and variances and administrative review permitting processes, I had tried to push the people to have a little bit of a longer time frame, but we thought it was going to be okay. And then at the 11th hour, surprise. So it is, better to give yourself more time if possible, but also understanding in this market, a seller wants to see you get in and get out if you are having a home inspection to begin with anyway. So 15 days, probably not going to fly. That's not a rule. That's obviously just kind of how things are right now. But
most people are calling for 7 days.
Right.
at this point.
I just wrote an offer yesterday with 7 days, hoping that maybe we can get in for the first 3, right? And it's all a big hope. And again, that's a really important reason to have a trusted home inspector like yourself, who kind of bends around, luckily for us, right, to make our deadlines happen. And we put a lot of pressure on you guys to do that for us.
And with us, with HSH, we're lucky we have 4 inspectors, so we have much more flexibility than, say, a one-off show guy. You know what I mean? They've got a trip planned someplace. They don't have anybody else to take care of it. You know what I mean? But my guy and me and my guys, I mean, we're always flexible. We always want to make sure to help you guys out in any way that we can to make sure that your clients can get what they need. So it works out really good that way.
I can vouch for that. We've had plenty of times where we had something come up quickly and you guys were able to scramble and make it work, and just one way or the other, a couple hours here or there, just to make sure that we get everything done. So appreciate that. Yeah.
Now, the last thing with the home inspection contingency is we find a defect. Let's say, like yesterday, I had a foundation wall bowing by 2.5 inches. Okay. Wow. It was pretty visually. Yeah, and they had spilled all the cracks with spray foam because water was coming in.
Oh,
hey, yeah.
What did the condition report say?
Nothing.
Oh, interesting.
Didn't know anything. Yeah.
And completely.
I lived here for 2 years and everything worked good. And then when I pulled up, the guy was like, "Oh, I never had water in the basement before, but I got water in the basement now all of a sudden. I don't know, just because you're coming today, And I'm like, go down there and I'm like, there's been water coming in this place for like 30 years, man. So yeah, but that's for them to work out. I guess I'm not involved with that part at all. But holy cow! But when these guys found all these defects yesterday, I mean, you're obviously going to digest it. You're not going to ask for every defect to be corrected, but you ask for something probably, unless you don't think you're going to find another house, right? I mean,
yeah, I think it depends on what the defect is and how bad it might be. If it's 2.5 inches out of plumb, right, so you got a nice bow in the wall and there's water coming in, I mean, you're going to be talking about probably drain tile. You probably have to replace drain tile. You have to excavate, bracing the wall. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that might have to be done at that point. So.
Yeah, I mean, and you're either I'm okay with it, or we negotiate it, right?
But honestly, it would behoove the seller at that point in time because they now are known. The defect is known. So they're going to have to amend their real estate condition report. Right. You'd be quite surprised, I feel like, how many houses go back on the market and unfortunately don't get an amended real estate condition report, which is really suspect. Right. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but one would think that the agent and the seller now has the knowledge. So
it'd be fraud then.
Tisk. But right? When big things like that come up, I would say that it is in the seller's best interest to keep that buyer happy now, because once you go on the market, you're marred. I mean, it is what it is. Will there still be a buyer for your property, possibly at the price that they're asking for it, though? When you're talking about a huge basement repair like that? Yeah. Maybe not so much, because a lot of buyers I know are very scared of foundation stuff. Rightfully so. It's a really big repair. But with proper education and the proper fixing, once that thing is fixed, it's probably good as gold.
This one with needing a new roof, having mold in the attic, having the foundation problem, having all the structural issues. I mean, there's $100,000 worth of repair on a $185,000 house. What do you do? Right,
and I think that's where the pre-listing inspection comes in for sellers. If you did that up front, you'd know those issues and be able to either let the buyers know about that beforehand and know that, okay, we've already taken care of that in the price. Like, we've lowered the price because we know that those are going to have to be done.
Sure.
But that's the hard part. Like, I feel bad for some of our buyers who we've looked at homes. They've brought in an inspector to get it done. And the seller, for the most part, most sellers know a good deal about their home and what issues might be there. Yeah. So they spend their money on that. And then they say, well, you know what, we're gonna pull out of that deal because we found issues with A, B, C, and D. They pull out. Now they've got to go find another house that doesn't have a pre-listing inspection. Now they've got to spend more money to get the inspection done. Yeah. But to protect themselves, I mean, that small amount of money could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, or at least $10,000 to $20,000.
Life-changing.
Life-changing. You're right.
Yeah.
Well, and from a seller's perspective, if you weren't aware of these things when you put the house on the market, and now you have to understand that you've got to now either price it appropriately, okay, and disclose, or repair, and those are really your only two options, right? And you've already got a fish on the hook at a price that you like. So take that money, and instead of reducing your house value by $20,000, to attract somebody to a house that has a bad foundation, let's just fix it, and now we get the price that we're looking for. But
yeah, I think it's important. Sellers should know what they're selling. The buyers should know what they're buying. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we were just talking before you arrived, Mark, that we were going to be doing a pre-sale inspection, not knowing are we going to sell this year or next year, but a checklist for us. Let's prepare ourselves. Let's fix all these smaller things so that we know the people. And if there is something big, okay, well, now we have 12, 18, however many months. And then you also only charge a small fee, right, to come back out and maybe take those things off. There are things that you can do to protect yourself as a seller as well. And I understand that in this market, they might be like, oh, I don't want to spend that money. But, surprises suck. Think of the stress of that. I mean, this guy may not have known anything was going on, right? But the stress of the surprise, like, what am I going to do now?
The spray foam was pretty fresh. So I'm just saying.
I'm not saying.
I'm not saying nothing, but wink, wink, nod, nod.
It's important, like he's saying, to know what you're selling.
Yeah.
And why would you want to be selling a bad product? Don't get me wrong. There's going to be 1,000 people interested in your property, et cetera. But that doesn't mean to cut corners.
No,
in any capacity.
Not at all. Right? And it's not. It's gonna. If you misrepresent the home that you're selling intentionally. Like I had that couple, we had talked about it a couple shows ago where they bought the house in Wauwatosa for $50,000 over asking, and it was $50,000 over asking, and basically they forego the home inspection contingency. They even skipped the financing contingency. I don't know how you do that unless they're paying cash for the house or something like that. They basically, the realtor was like, well, you really should get an inspection. Well, I'll get it inspected after I get into the house. They had me come in. And the guy that sold the house had the house up for sale in the middle of winter, and then he basically didn't disclose the things that he was aware of about the house. So when they found out that they did a new roof and that they needed all new siding, and that 75% of the windows were bad, they went out and got bids for contractors, and they got lucky in that they had a roofing contractor come and said, "Oh yeah, I was here 6 months ago and took a look at this roof, and I told the guy he needed a new one because it was all messed up." And then when he looked at the drone video of the house that we did. Basically, you saw all the tar that the guy had gone up there and put on, to cover up the spots or whatever, and the guy didn't disclose it at all. So then they're like, well, wait a minute, how much other stuff does this guy know? So then they found the foundation guy that had come out 6 months ago, and when the guy was getting ready to sell the house, he went out and had these things priced out, is what he did. And then he chose to sell it in the middle of winter when the roof was covered in snow. In the basement, he had caulked the joint in the basement, so that it didn't look like a big crack, it was filled with like this gray concrete patch, and yeah, so he ended up, I guess, having to buy the house back, was what their resolution was. But I was on the hook as like a witness or whatever, to testify, and I never had to go testify, thankfully. They all worked it out outside of court. But holy cow, could you imagine? You get your new house, and you move in, and then all of a sudden, because you misrepresented your last house, you got to give them all their money back somehow, some way. Who's got an extra? I mean, it was in Tosa, downtown. It was in Tosa.
Yeah, that was pretty expensive. Holy man, yeah. And good that they found these contractors, because I had a quite similar situation where the attorney was like, well, unless you can absolutely concretely prove that the seller knew something was going on, you're probably SOL.
Or they're willing to come in and tell you the truth.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
But good for those people. I mean, thank goodness, right?
They got
because
lucky.
Yikes. But again, the extreme mishaps of, waiving inspections. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But that is home inspection contingencies, you guys. Good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Educational. If you're looking to buy or sell a house, good information there. We are going to have this up on the replay so people can watch it during the week if they want to. And Tammy's going to break it up into some small sections and stuff, so you don't have to sit here and watch the whole hour if you don't want to. But it's also going to be up on the podcast. That'll be up on Monday, so you can listen to that on your way to work and stuff. But lots of good stuff in there to help you better understand the offer to purchase, and from a buyer's and seller's perspective, both important perspectives to take a look at it from. But thank you very much for coming in today, Corinne.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. What a great conversation, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely.
Nice to meet
we
you.
will talk to you soon. But you got to run. You got some
I have
stuff
some showings in Muskego.
So
I got to go.
Brave. It started snowing like crazy, like 15 minutes before the show. So
I'll toss it in 4-wheel drive.
There you go.
We're good to go. We're good to go.
You just got to get some of those beefy tires on that Jeep of yours. So
travel safely.
And Tammy will show you out. If you want, there's coffee, tea, soda. Grab something on your way out.
Awesome.
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too.
It was good to see you.
So
if you need something, holler at me.
I will definitely, for sure.
All right, so that is Miss Corinne Fales from Remax. If you're looking for a realtor, both Mark Smith of Keller Williams or Corinne Fales of Remax, both great agents. I've been working with them both for a very long time, and they would be happy to help you out. And then our last thing to let you out at the tip of the week, check your sump pump every 6 months. It's that time of year, people. Check that sump pump. Make sure it's working for you, all right? Thanks for coming, dude.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, thanks for tuning in today, you guys. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you want to know when we put out the next one, give me a bell notification. It's a little bell on the bottom right-hand side. And subscribe. You want to know when I'm coming out with new stuff or whatever. You want to be able to check us out and be alerted to new video content coming your way. Subscribe button's really the way to go. Thanks again for tuning in, you guys. Remember, the better you take care of your house, better it's going to take care of you. Have a good one.